if nothing happens in August, the economies will be back on track. The situation is changing according to the herd psychology. In September and October, we can get the good second wave. The government is kind of a barber in that sense.
Welcome to the 9th episode of our Surfing the Curve series. In this episode, we've decided to broaden our scope, and I'd like to introduce you to Andrey Movchan, CEO of the Movchans Group and global economist. Andrey will speak to us more on a macro and microeconomic level, delving deeper into the investment world.
Good morning, Andrey. It's lovely to have you here with me this morning. Thank you so much for agreeing to this interview. It's great that we've got such an expert like you with us today. So let's begin. My first question is, what are you seeing in the economy at the moment? Obviously, there's a lot going on. Markets have started to rally. Does that mean that there's more optimism in the economy?
In two words, if we see the market now, is what we have in the economy right of today. China's like 90% recovered. It's 87%, the latest data, recovered from the shutdowns and lockdowns. Not only in China itself, but in all the supply chain and demand change in the world. So China is almost back on track with the economy. Countries like America and Europe, they are like halfway back. It's the drop was about 15 to 20% in GDP terms, and now the June looks like we don't know yet, right? But it looks like -7, -6% month to month to June last year, and it means that if nothing happens in August, the economies will be back on track. And then if in August economies are back on track, especially given the fact that the economies are being released now in many ways, in many senses, the governments are making the businesses work again. I just heard that Europe is being opened since 15th of July, and Russia is ready to join Europe in opening the international flights on the 15th of July. And most of my mates and acquaintances plan on August trips to the vacations, to the recreational places and spots, and most probably what we will see that August would be run if it were a normal circumstance, normal year, and then we don't know what happens in September. The situation is changing according to the herd psychology. It's not about herd immunity; it's about herd psychology now. And if in March we saw the menace of the virus as the most important factor, and the governments needed to lock down the economy and needed to provide for social distancing at the expense of the economy. And now the herd, now the society is frightened with the economic consequences, and people forgot literally about the coronavirus. Everybody believes coronavirus is disappearing. It becomes lighter, it becomes innocent, or whatever. Or maybe they don't think about the virus, they think about the economy, and now the governments need to open the economies. Then, over time, the society would become used to the economy working. And if the second wave of the coronavirus comes, most probably we'll hear the voices saying we need to close the economies again because there's the virus again in the society. And in September and October, we can get the good second wave. The history says that the viruses usually come in three waves: a big wave, a very big wave, and a small wave. We've lived through a big wave now. Now we're entering the summer even in Russia, and most probably the epidemiological situation would be easier in summer, but then most viruses come back in autumn. And because of that, we can count for a second wave, and we potentially can count for the second wave of lockdowns and the second wave of recessive economies. And the second wave would be worse.
Of course, yeah. So you mentioned that governments are doing their best to try and boost the economy. Obviously, they've been offering funding for furlough, for small businesses, to try and keep everyone on track. But what does that mean over the long term? Obviously, in the short term, it's helping to boost the economy. But where is that money going to come from in the long term? Are we going to have to make it up somehow? Is it going to be inflation?
No, well, the first instance decision was made on a very simple assumption. When you lock down the economy, some people do not get paid.
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean? It means monies are stuck somewhere. They just do not do not infiltrate the economy. And if monies are stuck somewhere, you need to exchange these stuck money for liquid money. You need to give people who are not paid money to work. And essentially, regardless of whether a barber did a haircut for you, if the barber did that, you would have paid him, right? And the money would come to the barber.
Yeah.
And now you just didn't do your haircut, and the barber is stuck without money. If the government gives him some money, it would be as if you had the haircut.
Yeah.
So nothing unusual happens in the economy. There is no more money in the economy than it was before, because you preserve your own money.
But sure, but then the government already don't have enough money. For example, they've been complaining that there's not enough money to fund the NHS, to fund services like the police force and the ambulances, etc. So where does that money come from?
No, but that's okay. The government is kind of a barber in that sense. The
Right,
government
okay.
didn't get taxes as well as barber didn't get paid for the haircut, and you need to get money to pay these taxes. And the government. Wait, let's say very very rudely, because it's not true, but let's say it for better understanding of the situation. The government printed money,
Yeah.
and gave them to the barbers and to itself to compensate for money stuck with you, because you didn't pay your taxes and you didn't pay to the barber. But what do you do with your money if you didn't pay it to the barber and didn't go to pay taxes? You save it. And if you save it, and because of the very low interest rates, you generally save it by investing in the market.
So that's going to then boost the market, which is obviously optimism then
in the market.
Absolutely. We needed to give money to the barber. The barber needed to buy bread, and the barber needed to preserve his premises to do his haircuts and whatever. We needed to preserve the economy, and it pays back. You see how the number of jobless claims drops down in America. Yeah. Because we preserve the companies, and once we release the companies, we allow them to work, they start working immediately.
Sure.
And that's very good. On the other hand, all of us, you, me, and whoever else who didn't pay the barber, we brought our money to the markets.
Sure.
Because we didn't have any other alternatives.
Sure.
Right? And because of that, the markets boosted.
But what about then in America, for example, where the dollar has dropped in value? Does that mean that the devaluing of the dollar has actually decreased our investments? Is our money worth less?
No, well, I don't like the word devalued, because it doesn't mean much to me. What does it mean, devalued? It's a bit lower to euro than it was before the coronavirus. In amount of time, it may be a bit better than euro, a bit more expensive than euro. It fluctuates somehow. And the difference is not because of the coronavirus. It's because of such sporadic fluctuations.
Okay.
On the other hand, the inflation in America is at record lows. It's 0.9%. So given that, the dollar is not devaluing. There is no devaluation of dollar. And there is no devaluation of dollar because of the situation. Your money is stuck. There is no new money in the real economy. Then, with regards to the markets themselves, of course, given the circumstances, the markets should have been much lower, because we have the full-scale crisis, and in full-scale crisis, markets should go down.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, they go back because crisis is gone, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now they should have gone down, and their rebound is too early and too high, specifically given certain sectors like technology sector, for example.
Sure.
And but for the government, but for the emission, and but for the Federal Reserve System, we would have said we need to expect the second crisis in the markets, because when companies are opened and you eventually go and do your haircut, where do you take your money? You will take your money from the markets.
Yeah.
But because the government given so much money, these monies would come eventually to you in a circle. And you potentially would use them instead of your own money to pay for a haircut in the last instance, right? And because of that, the markets could stay high and expensive for quite some time.
A lot of economists have been talking about the worst recession in history. They're saying that this could be worse than 2007, 2008, worse than Spanish flu. Does that mean that you're saying that this is unlikely because markets are actually doing well and that we could actually see a positive at the end of this because people will be spending money?
Absolutely. To be precise on that and very, very accurate. In the circumstances we are now, there is no sign of big Great Recession. The crisis is absolutely artificial. It's administered by the governments. It doesn't mean that it's bad, right? It might be very good. We saved many lives, but then it's still administered by the government, and the government decides whether we continue the crisis, we prolong the crisis, or not. And as of today, the majority of the governments decide not to prolong the crisis. And the monetary measures they undertook were undertaken because they wanted the crisis to stop at the moment they stopped to prolong that, to let all the companies get back to work as quickly as possible, to get all the routine to be done as quickly as possible after it's allowed to be done. And so far they've succeeded with that. And if everything happens as we foresee now, there wouldn't be a big crisis and there wouldn't be a Great Recession, and everything would work back pretty soon, and we'll soon forget about the problem. But there is one circumstance which we do not know. We do not know the future of the pandemics. And again, if the pandemics comes back in a matter of a month, 2 months, 3 months, 5 months, produces a second wave, and, which is more importantly, the government decides, or any government decides, to come back to lockdowns, we'll have another war. We don't know what happens. We don't know the deepness of the lockdowns. We don't know the longitude of the lockdowns, and we cannot predict now what's going to happen. Most probably, it will cause the second wave of the market crisis because it's an unexpected circumstance, and the monetary measures are mostly exhausted on the first wave.
Sure. And I think that what you've mentioned there is probably the most important element of this, that it's unpredictable. We don't know. We've never seen anything like this in history. There's nothing we can really compare it to. And unless you've got a crystal ball, which I don't think any of us have, you really can't predict what the next stage will be.
It's worse, actually, because we have certain predictions. The predictions are based on the previous virus pandemics. We know the Spanish flu, we know the pandemics of 1957, we know the pandemics of 1968. All of them, as I said, produced 3 waves. And the second wave was the worst wave. We can expect, if we are lucky, and we're usually, the human beings are usually lucky, we can expect that this particular coronavirus would not produce the second wave for a certain magic reason. I don't know why. Just would not produce. And that's what all the governments now do. They act as if there would be no second wave. But unfortunately, I don't believe that that's true.
Okay, so you plan for the worst, but act like it's going to be the best. So trying to bring optimism to the markets.
They're actually acting as if they plan for the best. That's quite frightening.
Yeah.
The other thing is that the public opinion may be in favor of lockdowns or against the lockdowns.
Yeah.
I ran a poll recently with Russian people, more than 3,000 people responding about the second wave. 60% of the respondents said that they expect the second wave, but they don't expect more lockdowns.
That's really interesting.
Which means that these people kind of are really ready to sacrifice for the economy as of today. Yeah. We don't know the opinions in autumn, for example. We don't know what people would say in England or the United States in September. But the evidence is quite negative in that sense. You see all these manifestations, all these riots or public actions. They completely ignore the danger of coronavirus. Sure. It looks like the majority of people in the society discount the coronavirus already. They may continue doing that in autumn, in fall, and then we'll see the big second wave, and the reaction of the society and the governments would be much more like the reaction in 1968, when local quarantines were established with local communities, nothing on the federal scale, nothing on the global scale, no businesses shut down. The society lost about 4 million people, and about 700 million people were ill. We easily can get in that situation with the coronavirus as well.
My final question is, if you could take one market area or, one specific area for investment, what do you think is going to do the best out of this situation where we are now and also where we might be in 6 months' time?
I would, as usual, I would refrain from exact advice. Now, I wouldn't name the industries because it doesn't make much of a sense. I would say that in real circumstances of today, you should look at two different kinds of industries. The resilient industries, the stable industries, which survive the crisis because they are not affected or mildly affected by the crisis, and pick up good companies out of that.
Okay.
Because they will perform in such low rates environment, in such rich monetary environments, they would perform. And the second group of industries would be the industries which are affected by the crisis and seriously affected by the crisis, but they are oversold because people expected the crisis to be a Great Recession or Great Depression or whatever, and it actually is not. And we now know that it is not. But the market has its inertia, and you may buy certain companies which are still valued as if the problem exists and the problem's over to a large extent, including certain companies in the oil industry, for example. Oil industry was sold like hell, and because everybody believed that oil would be priced $10 per barrel, and now it's 42. 42, it's pretty much what it was before. So just looking at these two kinds of industries, you can create a portfolio which potentially would outperform the S&P.
However, you probably have to be looking at more of a longer term investment in order to make the money, because short term it's going to be incredibly volatile, and unless you're very much a risky investor, then longer term is for you.
No, well, I never think in months. I think in years, because in equity markets, months bring you volatility. It doesn't matter. You usually buy good companies, and whatever happens with good companies, you wait until they perform, right? And I never bought bad companies betting on the market. Right? Bad companies eventually they betray you. You need to buy good companies and be patient.
That makes complete sense, because at the moment the volatility is probably a bit too much for a lot of investors to ride out. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Andrey. I really appreciate your time and your views. It's been wonderful talking to you, and hopefully we'll catch up again soon. Thank you.
There might be a potential second lockdown this autumn, but if Andrey's advice is anything to go by, then it might not all be doom and gloom. Tune in next week to find out more.